Right, so we're inside of the hip file for a world Ablaze, and you can see there's quite a lot going on here. So quite a lot of things. Your out context, there's also a lot going on. So you can see multiple renders actually that I have rendered and then composited in Nuke, and we'll get to that in a later video. But let's first talk you through how to make everything work inside of this scene file. First off, I'm using Houdini 19.0.455. If you're on a higher version, everything should probably work. If you're on a lower version, I cannot guarantee things aren't gonna work. So probably just be on Houdini 19 and it should probably be fine. If you're getting errors while opening the file, that's normal. Sometimes between Houdini versions or builds, user interface elements might change and you get an error when opening the file. You can just ignore that. It's a little pop-up saying user interface, blah, 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 parameters. You can just ignore that. Generally, that's fine. That happens quite a lot. And I've gotten questions for other HIP files that I've shared about people worrying about those source files. So no worry there. I'm using Axiom V02B001. So this is important. So this is Axiom 2. So the first one was free. Axiom V1 was actually free. This is using 2, and this is not going to be compatible with Axiom version 1. Axiom, it's like as you've already seen, Axiom is really fast. So I highly recommend trying out Axiom. But like all of the sims here are done with Axiom. But again, if you want to re-implement it based on the Pyro stuff from the previous video, you should have the toolkit available for you to do that. Actually, I started this project with Pyro because I knew I was gonna share the source files as well, but because I had to do so many Pyro sims, it just made more sense to do it in Axiom because Axiom is really fast. But anyway, for Axiom, the build is very important. So you need this specific build. You can actually have multiple builds installed for Axiom. So the thing is, when you open up a version with something that's newer, the user interface will automatically update. With Axiom, that doesn't happen. So you actually need to have different builds installed. So if I go to my installations here, so you actually have two builds installed. I have Axiom V2B001 because this is one that I've used for a project a while ago where I had to do some fire for some feature film. And I used that one. So I still have it installed. And then this one is the latest one at the time when I was making this. Maybe by now there's a newer build. I haven't checked yet. But you can see I can just install them both and then both will work. So just so you know, you can just put in your, like both these files, both these things, and then everything will work. So make sure that you have this build installed if you're looking at these files, else still stuff will break. So just keep that in mind. So another thing, cache files are not included, and some of you might be, well, duh, but I've actually gotten this question quite a lot from people who've gotten my source files for other projects, especially for the one I have some HIP file with underwater bubbles, which quite a lot of people have gotten from Patreon or Gumroad, and I've gotten so many questions from people like, the geo isn't there, blah, 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 blah. Well, the cache files for projects like these are quite large. Like for this project, it was almost 400 gigabytes of cache files. So of course I cannot put that as a download, but you can just run the caches yourself and then you'll have all of these simulations. So make sure you have enough storage when you're gonna sim this out. So because like I mentioned, it's almost 400 gigabytes. So make sure you have like at least 400 or 500 gigabytes of storage, preferably on an NVMe drive. I am working on a dual NVMe RAID 0 setup, which for stuff like this was really heavy, that really helps out. But if you're just on a regular HDD or a network drive, it will still work, but you will need to make sure that you probably don't open up everything at once and try to scrub through it because it's just gonna get slow. Another thing, you need to make sure $root is, that's the thing on here, project root is set to the correct folder. So this is going to be the root folder of your project, which is this folder. So the root folder of the project. Make sure that it points to there. If you're copy and pasting a Windows path, it's going to have backslashes. You need to be forward slashes. If you want to know more about this thing, I have a VFX folder structure video on my YouTube that explains how this all works. But the idea here is that you can reference things in this folder with just typing $root in Houdini, and then you can type $root/assets, and again navigate to your assets, stuff like that. So, but again, watch VFX folder structure if you want to know more about that. You need to have this HDI installed in your documents folder. It's going to be, so you need to make an OTOS folder in your Houdini preferences folder here. So I have mine installed as a package, DVH, but you need to have something called OTOS, and then you can put it in there, or you can put it as a package. So if you put something like this, you can install it as a package, and I will probably also just include that in the downloads, but make sure that works. So everything will, because I'm referring to a lot of things in here with the $root. You also need to make sure that you put set project to your HIP location. So that's going to be the current location of your HIP file. So that stuff. Now about the MegaScans. I'm using a lot of MegaScans assets, which of course I cannot include in the download, as you already read in the description and so on the video, but you can download them with these codes. So if you just copy each of these individual codes in here in this note, let me actually select it. Just copy, search in MegaScans Bridge. You can download it. So if you just download all of these, and again, like if you probably have a month subscription to MegaScans, it will be enough to get all of these downloaded. So then once everything is downloaded, you need to do this thing. You need to use OP change, and OP change is actually quite nice. So of course my MegaScans library is located over here. So it's on the D/asset/MegaScans. But yours might be maybe on your C drive or your E drive or whatever it may be. So maybe yours is on C/MegaScans. And of course, if you're gonna change this everywhere in the scene, like everywhere in the file where I'm loading these things, it's gonna be a lot of work. But there's actually an easy way to change paths in your Houdini file for the entire Houdini file, and that's called OP change, and it stands for operator change. So pretty simple. So you need to open the text port, HScript text port on the window here, and you're gonna type OP change, and then we're gonna type two paths here. So first it's gonna be my original path, so /MegaScans. So that is the original path that you want to change, and then you do space, and then you do the second path that you want to change it to. So let's say I wanted to change to C // and then MegaScans, maybe with capitals or whatever. MegaScans, maybe that's where your location is. And if I now press enter, just keep in mind this path over there. If I press enter, whoop, you can see it changed it there, and you can see it changed it everywhere in the HIP file. So everywhere where it's loading these MegaScans, it will now replace the path. So this should be an easy way to set all of the paths for your MegaScans. So then you can make everything work there. So make sure to download these, and then with that out of the way, you should be good to go. So yeah, let's now continue with just explaining the rest of the source file. All right, so let's walk you through all of the stuff going on here. So some stuff you might think, all right, why did I do it like that? Because some of the stuff here I set up initially because I thought it was going to save time, and it did end up changing it a little bit down the line. But I'll talk you through the entire thought process of some of the stuff, because when I was making this, I knew I was going to do a lot of simulations, and the best thing to do is to sort of think ahead, because you can imagine if you're going to do a dozen simulations, that you want a way to sort of easily be able to do your simulations and then split stuff out, and that you don't have to constantly redo a lot of the work. So there's some stuff here that I've done that changed down the line, but we'll get to that in a little bit. And also because I was rendering this in Karma, as you can see, there's a whole bunch of Karma ROPs here. So essentially, well, you probably already know, but Karma is the replacement for Mantra, and it runs in Solaris. And as of Houdini 19, there's also now the Karma ROP here, which is essentially just the Solaris Karma in here there's a lopnet, and then here essentially it just loads all of the stuff and sets up a lot of the Solaris stuff for you, so you can just use it as a similar to how a mantra ROP would work. That was the first time for me using that, but apparently there are some things here that just don't work, and I'll get into what all of those things are because it's still a little bit buggy. So you can see some I have actually broken open. For some stuff I've actually just built my own lopnet here because some stuff just wasn't working and I just needed to do myself. So just keep that in mind. I'll explain once we get there. So it's still, maybe by the time that you're watching this, if it's like maybe by now within 19.5 or 20 is out and maybe this is all working a lot better, but as of right now it's still a little bit buggy. So we'll get to that when we get to that. Anyway, when I was building this, I initially thought out a way that I could sort of make this whole thing as easy as possible to just work on. So it's divided here up into a couple of steps. So over here we have just the MegaScans assets that are being loaded. So if you just go in here, let me just go in another one first. It just loads one model. It might make a little bit more sense. So you can see here, loading all of the MegaScans models. So the way you do that is you can just open up MegaScans plugin. You open up the bridge and you can select something and then you can go to export settings, put it to Houdini, and then you export it, make sure that you have this thing open. And I used Mantra preset, which used the principled shader because we're using Karma and that uses the same material, so that all renders just fine. So yeah, a lot of you know that normally I often use Redshift, but for Fire and stuff, it's just not ideal. I experimented with it, but just Redshift just doesn't look great with Fire. So I ended up using Karma for that, which also had some interesting lessons, which we'll get to that in a little bit. And there's some stuff here, for example, scatter setup, where I scattered some twigs and stuff like that. And later I figured I'd do simulation on this, but I didn't end up actually using this part here because I ended up doing all of that scattering over here. So you can see we're actually instancing this in Solaris. Reason being is that Karma does not seem to like, well, at least Karma, if like I have a whole bunch of fire and twigs that I was instancing, and if I was doing it with the Karma ROP here, it was getting extremely slow because it had to rebuild the instances and stuff like that. And that's one of the things that just doesn't work correctly yet. So I set up the instancing myself over here. We'll get to that in a little bit. So some of these things here are there mostly sort of still because I haven't deleted them yet, but just so you know. So anyway, loading the models here, pretty simple. So after we've done the models, of course, we need to start doing some simulations. So here I have a bunch of geometry nodes. We can just dive into one. And actually, it's a pretty simple thing here. You can see I've frozen some of the things because I ran into a couple of bugs where sometimes the paint shop here would just reset. But let me just unfreeze it for now. And let's have a look. Oh, as you can see right now, it was actually... all right, for this one, I don't think I actually ended up... Let me just have a look. All right, you guys can see there's actually something that went wrong there. But we have an attribute paint there. And with this attribute paint, what you can do is you can paint on your node. And I ended up turning it off in this one because I emitted later I made a version where I just emitting on this entire tree. But with this paint shop, so some of the results you might get if you run this sim is going to be a little bit different from what I had. But so essentially you can see if I paint here, this is where the fire is going to emit from. So you can just very simply paint and then scattering here based on the density attribute. So this thing is set to paint density. And we're scattering here the density attributes. You can see we get a bunch of points. Then I am multiplying here the attribute with a noise, and same here with the temperature. No, then over here I'm saying that, all right, if, and actually I see that this actually shouldn't work because I don't have a temperature attribute here yet. So technically I should put this to set, right? Over here I'm setting it right. If it's below 0, then put it to 0 because I've put it here to negative values, mostly as a sort of a clamp thing. And I'm rasterizing it into density, temperature, and burn. Again, that's the burn is here mainly because first I was using Pyro before, so you could get rid of that. But for now, it doesn't necessarily matter because it's an empty volume. Then I'm time shifting it here because we're just emitting it from a from a sort of a static thing. And over here, I have the tree. I'm polyfilling the bottom, so it's completely filled up. Let me make the background light for now, right? So I'm filling it up because as of right now, it's open. Then I'm filling it because I want to create a collision from it. So if you have a look here, creates a collision VDB. And again, you can just merge that into this thing and then it feeds into the Axiom solver. And then I can play through it. Let me put it to dark. Let me turn off the file cache for now. And you can see we get some very nice file. And this is, you can see, you might think, oh, this is slow, but if you middle mouse on this is really high resolution sim. Well, quite high. I mean, this is a background tree, so I didn't need the most high resolution sim, but you can see we get very nice, pretty fast frame sim. This is, now you can also see why I used Axiom, because this is just a lot faster than you would get if you do this in Pyro. And you can see after a while, it just slows down. So because of course the entire shot is in slow motion, I wanted to sort of just feel epic, not like a regular forest fire. I really wanted to just slow down, just focus on what is happening. Also, just fits the theme of the whole thing. And I think also with the music and the sound design, it really adds to the atmosphere. So I ended up actually slowing stuff down, which I just essentially did here. You can actually animate the time scale. Let's make the division size a little bit lower for now, so it's going to be a little bit faster to sim. So you can see just a start frame, just one step, and just animating the time scale here. Like you can see, just animating it down. Reason why I'm not doing it from the start is because, of course, it would really start from the start and then just really slowly move up. One thing that I also did here is in the sourcing, I'm actually multiplying the density by the time scale. Let me show you if I don't do that. Let me see if it actually, in some, maybe in this simulation, it might not make a big difference, but in some, it would keep sourcing the same amount and then it would slow down and then it would, right in this one, it doesn't get to, oh yeah, you can already see it. So it would really just fill up too much down here in the bottom. So that's why I multiplied the amount it's sourced by the time scale. So that way it sort of stays stays roughly the same throughout the entire sim. You can see now we get a nice nice look. Aside from that, it's pretty straightforward. So we have very little dissipation here. Of course, it's very slow sim anyway, and we only technically feel a very tiny part from it, because for here it's slowed down to 0.1%. Buoyancy to 1, a little bit of disturbance, a little bit of turbulence for this one. I did change the parameters for each individual one. You can see this is just the default. Turbulence, pretty much also the default. Very sort of pretty simple. This visualization here, later I'm doing another visualizer as well, but just some simple sort of Pyro stuff. Let me put the division size back to what it was. And if I turn on my, you can see it's a little bit different look now. So again, like sometimes this thing just doesn't seem to work properly, but that's fine. So if you just go through it, you can see this is my, and you can see if I scrub through it, it's relatively fast, even though it's 100 megabytes of frames. That's why you probably want NVMe storage. And the viewport now with Houdini is just quite nice. That fire in viewport looks pretty good. I also have some embers that I did. So you can see over here, it branches to the left. In compositing, I ended up sort of very, like, they're there, but they're quite subtle. And I have a lot of layers of different layers of embers. But how I made these is just, I'm scattering in the temperature field here. So only where it's hot, because I don't want to do it in the density, because if I were to do it in the density, you can see it's also going to do in the smoke. And of course, you only want to scatter these points inside of the part where sort of the fire is, where it's hot. So those parts. Scattering points. Then here I am deleting I'm deleting everything except for the velocity. And then I'm vector splitting this because I'm going to use this inside of here in a pop effect by volumes. So we need to split it to be staggered vector field here. And now converting it to a regular volume, as it's not going to work because it's VDB. And then regular volume. You can see in the colors, VDB is blue, regular volume is green. And also merging in here the collisions, right? So you just go in there. So this is quite simple here. You have a pop effect by volumes from second input. Essentially what pop effect by volumes does, it adds the velocities from the volume here. Let me just show you what's going on. So I have these points here. And let's plug it in. Let's plug the velocity in the second input. And here you can see now I can visualize the velocity from the second input. So you can see the... So essentially, that's just the way the volume is moving. So these things now get trailed based on the velocity from the second input. You can make the trail length a little bit there. It doesn't seem to do that much. So this is grabbing those volumes and then it's affecting the points that are being spawned with that velocity. And you can see I'm just going to play. And you can see them sort of. You see, it's a lot faster. Actually, I slowed this down after the simulation because with the slow motion volumes, I just couldn't get a good look right out of the thing. I have some pop force here as well, just regular pop force moving those. But it's a very simple sort of sim here. So if I just have a look at this thing, you can see this is essentially a full speed sim because like I mentioned, I tried to experiment with the time scale of the pop solver and just wasn't really looking good. It just wasn't getting a natural vibe. So I just tried to get a sort of a natural sort of look at regular speed. So this looks pretty decent. And then what I'm doing is I have time blend here, and time blend allows you to sort of slow down stuff. So make sure that it uses ID, scale velocities, so that the velocities actually also get scaled accordingly. And then I'm just putting input frame range and then the speed to 0.10. And then after you do that, you can see you see them pop out, but that's fine because of course we can scale them down over time. So, and then here we have a bunch of attribute. So here I am making scale variable. So that takes the age. So how old is a particle. And it fits it between 0 and the life. Life is the maximum life that something's going to be. And it's going to fit it between 0 and 1. So always try to fit stuff between 0 and 1. Then I'm saying the p-scale should be a ramp on this thing. So this is 0 to 1 thing. And then we're ramping it. And then we're doing a multiplier thing. So then we can do a p-scale thing. So if we check out let's do a copy points. Copy points. Sphere. Turn on back an instance. Right, you can see it's really small, but we could make this a little bit bigger if we wanted to, so you can actually see what's going on. So you can see they are moving in. As of right now, this looks weird because they're really big, but you can see and then they scale out at the end. And then it doesn't matter that they're popping out at the end because they will already be really small. But because we're having really small embers anyway, we're just You can see here, if you get in close, you can see it's actually looking pretty nice. Very nice. Very good. Very nice. Very good. Very nice. All right. And then we have some color. Very nice color. Mainly have the color here because I did the breakdown as well, right? So I wanted some color for the breakdown thing. And then here, again, this was just for the breakdown here. I'm just merging everything in so that I could do a nice little flipbook. So that's over there. But essentially this thing here is what I'm going to be loading in the when we're rendering this. And then in the material, we're actually setting these colors. So this was mainly for the visualization. But in the material, we're setting these colors. So yeah, as you can see here, we just have multiple nodes: tree trunk, fire, and embers. Pretty simple. And that's essentially what we're doing for every single simulation node here. As you can see, they're all pretty similar, but the settings are, of course, a little bit different for each individual one. So I've played around, like you can see, this one has less buoyancy, different disturbance values. But the same is happening for each of those things. And one thing to notice, by the way, is that all of the models here are located in the center. So these are not positioned in the scene yet. So that's kind of where the thing comes in, where I mentioned, all right, I try to pre-plan everything. Oh, by the way, one more thing here that I actually forgot to mention. A lot of these things here have an attribute from map. So what this is doing is it's grabbing the displacement from the material. So this is the displacement map that the texture has. And over here, you can see I'm actually sort of slightly offsetting it. So this is writing this out as a color. So this will put a color attribute on it. And then I'm displacing it here by the amount that the texture is doing. And then on there, I'm painting and emitting. The reason why I'm doing that is because, of course, in the render, this texture is going to be displaced. So this thing is going to be displaced. And I don't want the, where is it? All right. And actually this is incorrect. This should, all right. Just running into random issues I didn't notice. This paint should have happened on the, well, whatever. This geo should have gone over there. But so the reason why I'm doing that is because this is displacing post sim and I didn't want my fire to be inside of the tree trunk. So there's a thing, and this happens in pretty much every single one. So for the small branch, it's this one. This is actually a little bit interesting. It's a little bit messy here. Might clean this up a little bit before I get I thought I cleaned most of the stuff up before I started recording this stuff, but there's a lot of note. But essentially what this is, and you could just go over here to left. So there's on the, let me just grab the final video. So on the ground there's a whole bunch of small fires. So those are scattered twigs, and they actually, and actually, by the way, I noticed an issue in the final comp after so you see the twig here, the branch here on the end is frozen. I didn't notice that until after I uploaded. Anyway, but these twigs all have individual sims. So you can see here. See, here's a twig with a little sim. And here's another twig with another sim. And then, so the reason why it's over here is because of the breakdown that I did. And again, I can delete the stuff that I did over here, but you can see there's generally that's why the transform for there for the breakdown. So you can see every single one has its own unique simulation. Let me just remove this stuff. And the way that I did that is I just have all these things here loaded in. You can see this is just from the from this thing. So it's just loading this entire thing. I'm not loading them individually. Deleting a bunch of attributes and assigning materials. So that's already from the MegaScans thing itself. Right. Assembling, connectivity. So now they're packed. And I'm saying ID equals point number. So now they're getting an ID attribute, which is same as the point attribute. Well, you'll get that in a little bit. All right. Then over here, you can see there's blast, not twig. So this thing here is blasting away 1. You might think, right, what does this twig mean? Where does it come from? Because there's no twig attribute. Well, that's where this topnet over here comes in, task operators. And let me just cook this thing. So you can see there's a wedge here, and this thing has the thing called twig. And let me just go to the small branch. Right. Let me show it. Right. So this is currently evaluating. You can see whichever wedge I have here, that is which thing is going to be kept over there on the right. Right. So that allows me to cache multiple flames sort of from the same thing. So then we're unpacking it. And then we're doing noise, scattering, points on it. I guess could have done this the other way around. I'm not sure why I did it like that. Again, same thing there. Rasterizing. And then it's simulating. And we're copying the ID. You could just leave this out. Just for an older setup that I did originally where I needed the ID, but that's just there to be cute, I guess. Because before I was doing this whole caching thing in a for each loop and then blasting it away afterwards, but then later I just ended up doing it like this, which is a little bit cleaner. Also, it gives you nice. If I go in here, so in this file cache, so this Rob geometry output is going to be loading this out node here, which is loading both the branch and the fire. And then it's going to save that out, and it's going to save them to this location. And then wedge index is going to be the name of the index. So wedge 0, wedge 1, etc. So you can, if you go through this, you can see you get wedge 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., etc. So it saves out both the fire and a piece of geometry in one file. Here is the embers. I didn't end up using embers for this specific thing, but the setup was there. So should probably clean that up a little bit. Mostly just worried of breaking things in the midst, but essentially this is roughly what that was doing. Technically you could delete this, but it's just from another node here. I just when I was setting up a new thing, I just copied and pasted one of those nodes and I put it in there. So you have all of those things. So, and then later we are scattering these inside of slivers. So that's where all of those sims are done. There's a couple of more sims here, but let's come back to that for now. So this is essentially just the fire sims. So if you just have a look, so here you can see burnt log, the small twig. Let's highlight actually the output here. Again, that's why I did that for flipbooks. So fire there. And this one. So that's the entire sims. But again, they're all in the center. So they're all in the center of this whole thing. All right, so that's where this part comes in. So the layout. Going to layout, you can see this is where I'm placing these things. Okay. All right, so you can see here I'm placing them, and I can actually, you can see just shows the geometry here, and I can just move this around very easily and just moves the geometry, but it actually also moves the fire. So if we just go in here, you can see it loads geo, load fire, load embers, and then get moved, and then it splits it out again. Geo, fire, embers. Not sure why the time shift is there. I guess I was testing some stuff. So we're just doing the layout here. And my idea was that I wasn't sure how many things I was going to place. And my idea was that this is going to be a lot faster to sort of just place things. So I could just sim, I could just sim a tree. And then I could, if I wanted to, I could just position it again like this. And then it would already have the fire and stuff on it. And then what I do, if I go a level lower, right, you can see what I'm doing there is I'm loading from the layout, and here I'm actually just doing it manually. But what I was doing before is I was actually loading all of the fire just from every single thing. So my idea was that it would be easier to just, because initially I had, I think it's still here. I think it's this one. No. Oh, wait, that's a ground fire. I didn't end up using it. I guess you can get rid of that. All right, yeah, you can see here it is. So when my first tests, I actually just rendered all the fire in one go, but it didn't end up being super useful in compositing, but that's what I did initially. You can see I did layout /star /fire, so that would, from every node, load the fire node, which means I can just, if I wanted to, let me just link to the first thing, link the first flame. I could just, for example, copy a tree trunk here and then just move it over. All right, let's do another one. Let's have a look at what we're actually doing, right? I could just get this one, then move it, for example, over to the side. And then for some reason, it's not loading it. That's quite strange because that's essentially what it was doing. Let me just turn off. And then into this object. All right, okay, now it certainly works. So you can see now it's populated that thing in there. You can just move it, and then you can see you can very easily just populate your scene with stuff. So that's why what I did initially. So that's why the layout thing is there. Later down the line, I actually ended up still rendering everything separately. So you can see I still split out these things individually because I wanted separate renders for each of these individual elements. As you can see here. So didn't necessarily end up needing that, but I still think it was sort of a neat way of doing things. And again, that also worked with the embers. I guess not anymore, but that's what it was. What it was doing. Oh wait, it was the scatter embers. I didn't end up using those. Was the... All right, yeah, here's the geo. Oh yeah, there we go. It's embers tree. You see, for some reason, not grabbing the one, but that's essentially how that works. So useful tip, I guess, if you want to ever use that. So here I did some, did the scattering. This is a little bit messy here, but this I didn't end up using. If I just, so these are those burning twigs that I was talking about earlier. Again, they're all just in the center. I ended up sort of placing this in Solaris, so we'll get to that in a little bit. Some other small stuff here. So we have ground. This is a very basic ground. Essentially what the ground is just this. It's just a little grid, some mountain on it. Very simple. And I have an underground. It's the same, just moved down because for some reason, displacement was giving me some gaps. And that's a karma issue and I know how to fix it, but I figured this also solved the issue. So YOLO. Oh, extra far. Yeah, I did a couple of extra simulations for... so let me just open my composite real quick. And you can have a look at that. All right, so we're here in Nuke real quick. And you can kind of see here all of the individual renders. You can see everything was rendered separately and then color corrected and stuff like that. It looks weird here with color correction, but it's because the final shot, it does look nice. So you can see everything was rendered separately. I have multiple versions of some of these things and didn't end up using all of them. But you can see here are those secondary things that I made. So they don't look good in themselves. So it's like not really a great sim here. But if you then... Oh yeah, this is the wiper. Can get rid of that. So if you see them in the final sort of comp, and the wiper was for the breakdown. But if you see them in the final comp, they do sort of add like a nice extra sort of layer. See if I can. All right, and as you can see here, we're really just building everything up. See those sort of small things. Let me see where they branch in. That is, there are those things. All right, so if we go here, so if you disable some of those things, you can see they do add sort of nice, sort of extra detail to the entire thing. So like all of this stuff together really helps sort of really building up this this nice little picture. All right, so back in Houdini, here's all the stuff with the embers. I have multiple embers. There's 3 embers, but there's also environment embers here, and you can see this is quite a lot of environment embers there, but it's mainly so this is just mainly an extra layer here. I think, let me check where did I comp those in? Oh yeah, here's by the way the ground fire. You can see looks pretty nice. Embers, where are you? All right, here are 3 embers. And then, all right, here are the environment embers. So you can see, if you see them over here, actually it looks quite nice. Let's wait for this to is doing defocus, so it's not okay. Right, you can see here. Really adds to a nice picture if you add those in. So it's just really layering stuff on top of each other. So that's pretty much pretty simple setup. So this also uses pop effect by volumes, but the way I'm using it here is I often also just use pop effect by volumes if I don't even have a animated volume. I just like the way it looks. So what I've just done here is a volume VOP. Have the globals here and just putting it into curl noise, and then add a position and I'm binding it to velocity, and then just doing a, so this is a velocity volume here. If a box of the size I want it to be, I'm referencing the size, and then of course it goes into the volume VOP. Then we're doing the volume trill, and as you can see, then we get sort of a nice volume noise here. And you can see this add here essentially just gives it a sort of a general direction. So that's why I put it to 0.3. So they sort of move through the kill noise and they slowly move up. So that's why that's doing it. And then you can of course change the noise patterns. So that generates the velocity there. Then that goes to pop effect by volumes, adding some extra pop force on top of it. And then just simulating it out, and then we get a crap ton of points here. It's a lot of points. It's almost 100 megabytes a frame. Deleting the attributes here that I don't need off of it to save space, because you already see it's quite big. Again, here doing time blending stuff. Doing the trail, because the velocity wasn't... Oh, yeah, I didn't have this turned on, so I just ended up trailing them here. Complete velocity. And here I have a thing where... So I am... Here you have a UV texture, and that's doing the cam slow. So I have... I have 2 different renders, by the way, because I ended up retiming my entire composite by 50%. So I have the sims slowed down, but I also retimed my entire composite. But slowing down these embers doesn't necessarily work that well. See where oh yeah, you see here I'm slowing them down, loading it back in, but these embers, slowing those down didn't really work. So I slowed those down here, and I had a slowed down version of the camera, which is the thing over here, cam slow. So slowed down version of the camera, which is essentially just this camera 2 times as slow. And from there, I'm predicting a UV, and I'm saying distance is UV.z. So I'm getting an attribute from the camera all the way to the back, which is an, so we can go in the attributes here, dist, there we go. Get a distance attribute, and I could, if I color this, and you can kind of see better what's going on. Let me just ramp dist 50. So you can see you get a sort of a fall off there. Then promoting a dist, I'm taking the maximum, so the maximum value that they get to, and calling it max. Also doing the same for the minimum. Then we're promoting, so we're promoting those to detail. We're going to get a detail attribute with the min and the max. Then we're promoting those back to point. So we have them over here. And in the wrangle, I'm fitting dist between min and max, and we get a 0 to 1 value. So we get a normalized 0 to 1 value of distance. Copying those back to the points. And then we have a way to ramp our alpha in the distance. As you can see, quite nice. So that way we can fade out the scale and the, as you can see, we fade out both the scale and the alpha based on the distance. So that's what we're doing there. So just simple things, but they all add up. And here's another thing that I have. It's just environment fog. So it's just it's a little layer of environment fog. I don't think it's in the comp. It's very subtle, I think. Let me see where I ended up using it. All right, here we go. So this is that thing in comp. So you can see it's just it's a sort of a nice little smoke layer there, and then slightly color correcting that, and then just merging it in here. So you can see it goes from this to just this to having some nice sort of environment fog. And like, again, all of this stuff just really, all of the small stuff adds up. And it's very minor, but if you're just working on a sort of a fun project like this, yeah, you just start building up your content. Some of this stuff you might also just do with stock footage, but I was just working and it was just fun. So yeah, that's pretty much all of the simulation and other stuff. I think here I didn't end up using this. It was a little patch, which I am using this, by the way. It's a sort of a foreground fire thing. Let me see where this one. It doesn't look, it's not the most interesting thing, but it's a sort of a slight foreground fire, which I just ended up here merging in the foreground. So if you have, let's wait for this to cook. Yeah, all right, there we go. And then it gets added there. It's mostly visible in the beginning, but there's a sort of a slight out of focus sort of fire there, which I think, yeah, there you can see it's quite nice. We're just making elements. So that's yeah, that's a thing that I did. So here's the cameras, blah, blah, blah. There's the focus. I didn't really ended up needing those. I tried with the particles to render some depth of field into the thing in here, but it still ended up doing the depth of field inside of Nuke. Yeah, those are all the sort of the simulation parts of this whole thing. So you can see it's a lot of nodes, but it's relatively simple. Or here there's some other stuff that I didn't. I had some fire on the ground before. I guess I can delete that one because that looked terrible. Oh wait, I can maybe grab one of those renders and you can see what's going on. So fire ground. Let's see. So I had some of those patches, but it was just too much. Let me just have a look at the. Like it was little patches like this, but it was just too much. So when that didn't work out, I did want some stuff on the ground. That's why I come up with just doing like this, like little small twigs that are burning. And I think this just adds to a much nicer sort of look for this whole thing. So yeah, that's pretty much the simulation and just layout part of this. So now let's dive into Solaris. Or not necessarily only Solaris, but Karma in Rob context, in Solaris over here, just a general rendering because there's quite a lot happening there as well. So yeah, let's dive into that part next.